how important is it for you to have your film representing is the Chinese option for the Oscars? A Chinese film industry has been represented in the Oscar since 1979. So I guess it's a great honor, especially with this film.
It's a great honor to be included as a submission from China for the Oscars Best Foreign International Feature this year, Philippe. And I think it also means a lot to me as a filmmaker from Hong Kong. I don't think China has ever nominated a film directed by a Hong Kong filmmaker. And then to that, in that respect, I think I take that as a personal honor, and it's also an honor for Hong Kong. And at the same time, I think it's very important because we really haven't made it to the shortlist in 18 years, I believe. And I think that with the trust that has been bestowed on the film and the support, I think it's also my duty and my responsibility to try to make sure that more international audience will see it, and the film hopefully would make it to the shortlist. I think Lydia played the role with the kind of conviction I don't think I've ever seen with any actress I've worked in my 30-year career as a director. To play her mom, to match up to the one and only legend of volleyball, of Chinese volleyball, if not world's volleyball. I think it's a big chip on her shoulder. And like she said, she lost 30 pounds to play the role. And she needs to play someone 5-6 years younger than she is. And also a little bit that personal details that I would like to share here with your permission, Lydia, is when she graduated from Stanford, she was considering taking up volleyball as a professional career, and her mom discouraged her and said, if you want to be up there at the top, I don't think you're there yet. So I imagine how that would be an impact for someone like Lydia. And for this movie, she take this role as something to prove to her mom and the world that she's good. And I remember there was a scene where the women's volleyball team were playing against the men's team. And then that was like, to me, I call that a Star is Born scene, is when Lang Ping could do the spike that she did. And that spike is in every Chinese memory because it was immortalized in a stamp in China. So that posture and that pose of her doing the spike, Lydia went days on end to practice it. And when she finally did it on set, I took a snapshot of that. I sent it to Lang Ping, her mother. And Lang Ping, her mother, said afterwards that maybe the fact that she didn't let Lydia play professional was the biggest mistake of her life.
Yeah, that's a good story to tell. It's emotional and beautiful. Peter, let me ask you. I know that you integrated it. I mean, the storytelling is very important. You tell the story of volleyball in China. They won 5 consecutive big games or big moments, Olympic, and but at the same time, you don't only analyze volleyball, but you also analyze the way Chinese society was evolving throughout the years. Could you comment on that? There's a parallel story, I guess.
It's a very important thing to me because I'm not a sports fan and I don't play any sports and I don't even watch a lot of sports growing up and even now. And I watched sports only because I had to make the movie. So to me, the most important thing that attracted me to the film is the changing of the Chinese society. And that's kind of like right down my alley. I like to make movies that has a long arc and a long time span to show changes of society and people. And one of the most important element in the film, which was depicting life in the 80s, has always been in my dream that I wanted to capture. Being born and raised in Hong Kong, I've never lived through the 80s in the mainland China or in Beijing. I never went to China until the mainland until 1993. And every single friend that I trust and believed in kept telling me how beautiful and how hopeful and how the world was filled with possibility. Nothing is impossible in the 80s in China. It's kind of like the 60s in the US and in the Western world. And I was born in 1962. I always regret that I wasn't born 10 years earlier because I would have loved to grow up in the 60s. So to me, making a film about the 80s in China is like traveling back in time in a way where I could be, the children of the 60s. So that part was very important to me. But obviously, other than that, it's also the fact that the collectivism and the spirit of and the patriotism was very different in the 80s than it is today. That's why we have to deal with how volleyball players what is their psyche and what is their values and what is their sensibility playing for the country, their patriotism versus their personal self-worth, as opposed to players in the 80s. I think that's something that I really wanted to deal with in the film, and we've been able to tread very sensitive, waters, and dealt with both the changes between what happens in the 60s and what happens in China now today.
I would like to ask you, I know that for the film, there were professional actors, professional volleyball players, amateurs in both cases too. How did you melange or mix all of these different energies, and also having Lydia as the daughter of this heroic lady for the sport in the world?
I I have
Complicated.
I have the best ingredient to work with. And I think I was very blessed, and I can't boast and tell you that I knew going in what I was going to get ultimately. We had a very tight schedule, and it's something that I wasn't sure, but I'm a very positive person, and I always have wishful thinking. And I think that if there's a will, there's a way. Naively, I dived into this project like I'm going to make it, but to tell you the truth, in retrospect, I have no idea how it's going to turn out. And I've got the best, professional athletes uh, that came in to play the players in the 80s, including Lydia. And I have the national team for 9 days to, don't ask me how I did it in 9 days, to come in and did the parts of the presence, the Rio Olympics and all the different scenes leading up to that. So I have the best players, and I also have the best actors and actresses. Gong Li, Huang Bo, Wu Gang, those are the best actors and actresses you can find in China. Uh, but the most important thing is how to bridge them, professional and non-professional actors and actresses. I had a very good coach that helped me. I've never employed the help of a coach, a drama coach, to help me with my actors. This is my first time. I probably won't be able to do any film in the future without him. But at the same time, the key is how to put Lydia and Gong Li in the context of the same person, with a time break of 10 years in between. And I was very nervous even after editing. And I was only assured after the reception from the audience, first in China. And I think it's also because of how good they both were, that made it possible. Physically, do they look the same? Not exactly. I felt that there is a connection in sensibility, because they were both connected through Lang Ping. Gong Li did a great job in making herself feels like Lang Ping. I mean, she can't make herself look like Lang Ping, but she made herself felt like Lang Ping. And the kind of conviction, the kind of stubbornness, the kind of uh, you know, power
Pers-
that she that came across on screen uh, is something that no other Chinese actress could do in the role of Lang Ping. And I always thought that because Gong Li is not, that tall. I mean, she's tall, but she's like 170. But Lang Ping is 180. How tall is your mom? 184?
186. Yeah, 184.
186, yeah.
she's very
So
tall.
very tall. So of course, we did use some special effects, and sometimes we use some, boxes to make her taller. That she stand on apple boxes to make her taller. But she's towering in her presence. So to that extent, I mean, the biggest challenge was how to match Lydia into Gong Li, and that somehow worked.
Great. One last question. We're running out of time. I think they gave me 10 minutes. Uh, I know, okay, the pandemic has affected us all, filmmakers, non-filmmakers, population. But regardless of the pandemic, your film was a total box office success in China. I think opening weekend was 8.9 million.
Yes.
And how do you explain that? And how has the pandemic impacted your film or the way people consume the film?
The pandemic impacted me much more so before the release of the film. I mean, we were supposed to be released in January, and we were having a lot of problems. And then all of a sudden, after all the problems were solved and the film was out on the premiere on the 19th. I did a couple of days of junket. On the 22nd, I wrapped up my work, flew back to Hong Kong, and within 24 hours, I was told that everything we did, in the last month, in prepping the film for release was in vain because all the cinemas are going to be closed. And then nobody knew when the movie is going to be released, and that was the most torturous 9 months of my life. I call it stuck in limbo, and I kept giving consolation to my wife and my family and my daughter, and saying that take that as an early retirement, because when I retire, my daughter will probably be married and have her own life. And now I'm retiring for 9 months when they're still all around me, and we could spend a lot of time together. So we've been together ever since, till now. And I wasn't even back in China, in Beijing, for the release of the film because of quarantine and travel restrictions. So it's very weird that we're doing everything virtual, but because of simply because of the fact that the original title of the film in China was the Chinese women's volleyball team. It sounds sometimes it sounds silly to most of my non-Chinese friends that why would you call a movie the Chinese women's volleyball team? But that in itself is a representation of the spirit of how China was, in the 80s, and where China was yearning for the world's attention, yearning to be re-engaged with the world after being closed for decades. It was the beginning of the economic reform and the open door policy. So I think there's nothing that we could take credit for except the fact that the Chinese women's volleyball spirit is really the spirit of China. That's why it did so well in China.